Olga glanced at Kaya, who was sitting in the back seat, her eyes wide with excitement. She knew she had to choose her words carefully, especially with her daughter listening intently. It went. Fine, Maggie, Olga replied cautiously, her mind racing to come up with a plausible explanation. Frank seems willing to help us out, and he's here to support us through this difficult time. Maggie raised an eyebrow, sensing Olga's hesitance. Just fine? Are you sure everything's okay? You seem a bit tense. Olga forced a smile, trying to alleviate Maggie's concerns. It's just been a long day, you know. Meeting with Frank brought up a lot of memories and emotions, that's all. But he's agreed to play along with our plan, so that's a relief. Maggie nodded slowly, though she still seemed skeptical. Well, as long as he's on board helping us, we will talk about it later. Kaya piped up from the back seat, oblivious to the tension in the air. Mommy, when can we see Uncle Frank? Daddy again? I really liked him. Olga forced a smile, her heart heavy with guilt. We'll see, sweetie, after we are done with your great-grandma. After hours of their trip, they finally reached a familiar neighborhood, a place where both of them had suffered. When they were kids, no other kid ever wanted to play with them. They were poor and looked like they had no future. Now they have graduated from the best college in the country, and Maggie is such a famous singer that even rich people wish to be greeted by her. They reminisced as the car passed the neighborhood, flashing memories of their past. Olga couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia mixed with a tinge of bitterness as they drove through the old neighborhood. It was a stark reminder of the hardships they had endured growing up and the struggles that had shaped them into the resilient women they had become. Maggie, do you remember how we had to fight for love? Other kids always ostracized us, and we had to offer something to play with them. Maggie's grip tightened on the steering wheel as they passed by the rundown buildings and narrow streets. Despite her success, the scars of their past still lingered, a constant reminder of the obstacles they had overcome. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery outside the car window. Yeah, I remember. But look at us now, Olga. We've come so far from those days. We've built our own lives, our own success. Olga smiled softly, her eyes glimmering with pride. You're right, Maggie. We've overcome so much together. And now, we're stronger than ever. Kaya, who had been quietly observing the exchange, tugged on Olga's sleeve. Mommy, what are you talking about? Why did you have to fight for love? Olga hesitated, searching for the right words to explain their past to her daughter. Well, sweetie, sometimes life is like a big puzzle, and when we were younger, we had to figure out how to fit into it, how to find our place. Kaya nodded, but she was not satisfied with her mother's answer. Does that mean that I also have to beg for other kids to play with me? Olga's heart ached at her daughter's innocent question, a stark reminder of the challenges she faced as a parent in a world that wasn't always kind. She reached back to squeeze Kaya's hand reassuringly. No, sweetheart, you never have to beg for anyone's love or friendship. You're amazing just the way you are, and anyone would be lucky to have you as a friend. Maggie chimed in from the front seat, her voice gentle, yet firm. That's right, Kaya. You're a special girl, and you deserve all the love and happiness in the world. Don't ever forget that. Kaya nodded, her spirits lifted by her mother's and aunt's words of encouragement. As they pulled up to Grandma's house, she couldn't contain her excitement at the prospect of spending time with family. I can't wait to see Grandma. Olga smiled, her heart swelling with love for her daughter. Hey, sweet girl. She is not your grandma. She is my and Auntie Maggie's grandma, and that makes her your great-grandma. That's right, Kaya, Maggie added with a chuckle. Kaya, be a good girl. Your first meeting with her must be sweet. As they approached Grandma's house, Olga couldn't help but feel a sense of apprehension gnawing at her. It had been years since they had last visited, and she wasn't sure what to expect. Would Grandma still be the same warm, loving woman they remembered from their childhood? Or had time changed her too? Would she be able to accept the news about Kaya? Would she love her as her great-granddaughter, who was born without her knowing? Maggie parked the car in front of the familiar two-story house, and they all stepped out, their footsteps echoing in the quiet neighborhood. Olga took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever awaited them inside. She couldn't help but feel a sense of apprehension mingled with anticipation. She knew that the weekend ahead would be fraught with challenges, especially since they had a lot to explain to Grandma. The door swung open before they even had a chance to knock, and Grandma stood there, her face lighting up with joy at the sight of her granddaughters. "Olga, Maggie," she exclaimed, enveloping them in a tight embrace. "It's been too long, my darlings. Come in, come in." Right before she could even begin to hug her granddaughters, she saw a beautiful little girl jumping with happiness from the car. Amazed, she leaned a little. "And who is this beautiful young lady?" "Hi, Great-Grandma." Kaya beamed, her excitement palpable as she ran up to Grandma, her arms outstretched for a hug. "I'm Kaya, Olga's daughter," she exclaimed proudly, her eyes shining with admiration for the woman before her. Grandma's eyes widened in surprise, her gaze flickering between Kaya and Olga as she processed the revelation. "Olga, you have a daughter?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief and tinged with a hint of curiosity. Meanwhile, back at Hawkins Corporation, Nick was busy fabricating evidence of Olga and Frank's relationship over the past years. He knew that James was growing increasingly suspicious, and he needed to provide him with enough ammunition to take decisive action. Using his skills in manipulation and deception, Nick crafted a series of fake emails and text messages, painting a damning picture of Olga and Frank's supposed relationship. He made sure to plant subtle clues that would lead James to draw the conclusions Nick desired, all while ensuring that his own involvement remained hidden. Once he was satisfied with his handiwork, Nick sent the fabricated evidence to James, knowing that it would be enough to push him over the edge. He watched with anticipation as James reviewed the documents, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. "This is it," Nick thought to himself, a wicked grin spreading across his face. As James sifted through the fabricated evidence, his mind raced with a mix of disbelief and anger. The emails and text messages seemed to confirm his suspicions, but there was still a nagging doubt in the back of his mind. How did Olga know Frank Miller in the first place, to the extent that he would put his career at stake to protect her? James thought to himself. He wasn't fully convinced. Now he had a new plan in his mind. Something seemed off, and he had to find it out. Olga nodded, her heart pounding in her chest as she braced herself for Grandma's reaction. "Yes, Grandma." "Kaya is my daughter," she confirmed, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside her. "I didn't get a chance to tell you earlier, but she's here with us now." Grandma's expression softened as she took in Kaya's beaming face. "Come on in and sit. You better start explaining." Kaya sensed the anger in the old woman's voice and thought that maybe she didn't like her. The eyes that were filled with happiness now started to turn red. She looked at her mother, crying. "She didn't like me, right?" Olga's heart sank as she saw the tears welling up in Kaya's eyes. She kneeled down beside her daughter, wrapping her arms around her in a tight hug. "Oh, sweetie, no, that's not it at all," Olga whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Grandma just needs some time to process everything. She loves us very much, I promise." Maggie stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Kaya's shoulder. "Kaya, Grandma loves us all very much. She's just surprised, that's all. She'll come around, you'll see." Grandma, who had been watching the exchange in silence, felt a pang of guilt at the sight of Kaya's tears. She had always prided herself on being accepting and open-minded, but she realized now that she had let her initial shock cloud her judgment. "Oh, my dear Kaya, please forgive me," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I didn't mean to upset you. Of course I love you, sweetheart. Just like I love your mommy and your Auntie Maggie. I am just mad at your mother and your aunt for hiding you from me. I deserve to know I have a beautiful great-granddaughter. Kaya sniffled, her tears subsiding as she looked up at Grandma with wide, hopeful eyes. You really love me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grandma nodded, her own eyes glistening with tears. Of course, my darling. You're the best thing that has ever happened to me. And that means I love you with all my heart. She then extended her arms for a hug. Come here, Kaya. Hug me. Oh God, you're just as beautiful as your mother. With a radiant smile, Kaya threw her arms around Grandma, hugging her tightly. I love you too, Grandma, she exclaimed, her joy infectious as she nestled into the warmth of Grandma's embrace. Kaya giggled happily, reveling in Grandma's affection. Thank you, great-grandma. I'm so happy to meet you. Maggie smiled, her heart swelling with pride, as she watched the tender exchange between her family members. She knew that they were surrounded by love and acceptance. And for now, that was all that mattered. Orga and Maggie watched with tears of their own, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. Despite the initial tension, they knew that Grandma's acceptance meant everything to Kaya, and to them as well. But she saw that it wouldn't be easy to explain things to Grandma. They settled into the living room. It was renovated by Maggie when Orga was fighting for her life. When Orga got the job at the Hawkins Corporation, she used her salary to build a house for Grandma, and then everything changed. She went into hiding after being betrayed by James. When Maggie's career was booming, the first thing she did was give Grandma a good place to stay. The finishing of the house and the interior design and decoration were all her work. If it weren't for her kindness, she wouldn't be where she is now. Maybe what her stepmother said to her would have been true. As they settled into the familiar surroundings of the living room, Orga couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude towards her friend Maggie. Despite the difficulties they had faced growing up, Maggie had always been there for her, supporting her through the toughest times. Orga glanced at Maggie, her eyes filled with appreciation. Thank you, Maggie, for everything you've done for Grandma. I owe you. Maggie smiled warmly, her gaze flickering towards Grandma, who was sitting across from them, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. Hey, we're family, Orga. We take care of each other no matter what, she replied, her voice tinged with affection. And I can't forget how you took me in when no one else did. Not because you had more to offer, but because you loved me. I am where I am, because of your love and kindness. Grandma nodded in agreement, her eyes softening as she looked at her granddaughters. You girls have always been my pride and joy. I may not have been the best mother to your mother, but I promise to be the best great-grandmother to Kaya, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. Orga's heart swelled with emotion at Grandma's words. Despite their complicated relationship in the past, she knew that Grandma meant every word she said. Taking a deep breath, Orga knew that it was time to address the elephant in the room. Maggie took Kaya to rest, then came back so they could have a serious conversation. Grandma, first of all, we're sorry that we didn't tell you about almost everything we've been through. But that's why we're here now. Please open your heart to be able to understand, she began, her voice steady yet tinged with apprehension. Grandma nodded, her gaze fixed on Orga with a mixture of curiosity and concern. At Hawkins Corporation, James knew what he had to do to find out everything he wanted. Now I can finally kill two birds with one stone, James said with a confident smile on his face. Nick gave all the fake information to James, planning to make him believe the information, but now it looks like things aren't as he had planned. What plan does James have? Is this information adding to his advantage? He cleared his throat. Sir, you mean you don't believe this information? What plan do you have in mind? What do you want to do? James turned to Nick with a calculating look in his eyes. Nick, this information is certainly intriguing, But it's not enough to act on just yet. We need to dig deeper and find the truth buried beneath these fabrications. I am not convinced that this information is true. Look, Nick, use your mind. Frank is a powerful person. Do you think he would just expose his personal life like this? Perhaps this is the information that Frank wants people to see for his own reasons. James was on the right track. What he was thinking was indeed true, but it was all Nick's plan. If Nick slipped up a bit, James would uncover the truth. That all is planned. That Orga's daughter is his. And that Orga had never dated Frank. And that could point back to Nick. Nick didn't want all that trouble. Nick's heart sank as he realized that his carefully constructed plan might be unraveling before his eyes. But sir, we have everything we need right here, he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. James shook his head, his expression firm. No, Nick, we need to approach this strategically. If there's one thing I've learned in my years in this business, it's that rushing into action without all the facts can be disastrous. We can't afford to make any mistakes. Nick's mind raced as he tried to salvage the situation. He couldn't let James slip away from his grasp now. But what do you propose we do, sir? He asked, trying to sound cooperative while internally panicking. James leaned back in his chair, steeping his fingers in thought. Are you done crafting the draft for the guest list for our company's 50th anniversary celebration?